Hi, do you want to know how to bring your backing over to the front of your quilt to bind your quilt? I've got you covered completely in this video and I'm going to teach you exactly how to do it. My name is Kim, this is Quilt with Kim. You are very, very welcome. Let's switch camera and let's get right to it. I've used small samples or examples to show you how to do this because it's far easier to show you on camera or underneath a camera, but it's the same technique whether it's 5 or 6 inches square or a whole quilt. So let me show you. So this is a little sample here of one I've finished, and you can see, so this would be my quilt top. You can see here I've got this backing. Isn't this cute fabric? It's called Meow, would you believe? Really originally named. So we've got our backing, and you can see as I turn it over, it's that backing that's come to the front to become my binding, complete with mitered corners here. Okay, let's get that in camera so you can see. So it's pretty easy to do. So let me show you. I'm going to get rid of that one, and I've got a little sample that I've got ready. So this is what your quilt might look like when you've finished quilting. So this would be my quilt top, so you'll just have to do have some imagination for a moment. This is my quilt top, the white here. I've got my wadding here, or my batting, and the backing fabric over on the back. Now, as normal rules are, when we are quilting, our wadding, our batting, and our backing needs to be between 2 and 4 inches, maybe a bit larger depending on your quilt, bigger than your quilt top. That is because, in case you didn't know, that's because when you're quilting, it tends to pull in your backing and your wadding or batting, and it can all get a bit wibbly wobbly. And some of it can sort of be in here, and it can be a bit all skew with. So by having what's called the over or the overage, that's what that term refers to, it will happen, but we end up trimming it all off. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter how big or small your quilt is. This is a nice tiny little quilt. It doesn't matter how big or small, you still need this over bit here all the way around your quilt. So we can pretend that we have finished our quilting, and we now want to use our backing here to come over to be the binding on the front of the quilt, just like this little example here. So the first thing that we have to do, we have to very carefully trim our wadding or batting out of the way. Wadding and batting are exactly the same thing. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to grab a ruler, grab my rotary cutter, and it's going to be a bit easier on this because it's so small. I'm separating the two. Now, these are normally stuck together with a bit of 505 spray or, temporary adhesive if you've been spray basting your layers together. So if you have, just peel them apart until you've got to your quilt top. I'm going to fold that out of the way very carefully. I do not want to cut my my backing fabric, so perhaps I will do it from here. Let's carefully trim that. Now, if you prefer to use scissors, for goodness sake, use scissors. What we're trying to do is get rid of the excess batting, but we want to leave the backing in place. If you've been quilting and you've been quilting right into this section here, so you might have quilted into here, you're not going to be able to fold this back, in which case just use your scissors. Just go careful. But for a bit of expediency, and because I haven't quilted it, I am going to use my ruler. I'm also making sure that I am cutting it square because we don't want wibbly wobbly quilts. Just tuck that out of the way. last but not least is this side. It's all well stuck down, isn't it? If you are doing this on a full-size quilt, to be honest, your scissors are going to be a lot easier. I like things to be easy if I can make them easy. So what we've got now is our wadding or our batting in the middle of our backing and our quilt top, which is precisely where it needs to be. I now need to trim, and this bit you will need to use your ruler and your rotary cutter because you need it to be really straight. So this bit here, this excess of my backing, that's what's going to come over to become my binding. All right, so what I want to trim this, so the distance between the edge of my quilt top and my batting, my wadding, and the raw edge here, I want that distance to be twice whatever I want my binding to finish at. So in my little example, this binding, the finished binding on this particular example is 1/2 inch. To be honest, that's what I normally bind all my quilts at, is 1/2 inch, but you might have something a bit different. So if this is 1/2 inch, then I want to cut this at 1 inch. We want it twice what we want to finish as. So I need to get my ruler and I need to trim all the way round at 1 inch. So I'm now needing to be really careful because I need this to be straight all the way around. I don't want wibbly wobbly, otherwise it's just not really going to work. So I'm looking, using my ruler, and I'm looking at where all the horizontal and the vertical lines are to make sure that I can trim this at 1 inch. So can you see I've got 1 inch here, I've got a straight line up here and a horizontal line along the bottom, and I can trim this little bit off here. How much you're trimming off how much you're trimming off really just depends on how much overage you have, and I can't tell you that because it just depends on your quilt, and it may be wibbly wobbly, as I said, because you've been quilting and it does make the edges go wibbly. I just haven't got wibbly wobbly edges. Well, I have personally got wibbly wobbly edges. I've got plenty of those, but this example here hasn't got any wibbly wobbly edges because I haven't been doing quilting on it. So, same thing again. Let's leave my wibbly wobbly edges out of this, shall we? So we got straight horizontal line here. We got a vertical going up the edge here, and we got a horizontal line along the top. And I'm going to trim off at the inch. Try not to knock the camera this time. There we go. So it's 1 inch there and 1 inch there. And I'm going to do the same for the sides. I've got the giggles now. There we go. So same thing again. Straight, straight, straight. Trim it at 1 inch. And then the other side. Oops, nearly. Did you see what I nearly did there? Pays to just take a moment to check. I'm human too, you know. I have my moments just along with everybody else. So I've got 1 inch. I'm very happy with that. All right. So danger averted there. So I've got my inch all the way around. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is fold these corners over. So you want a nice 45-degree angle just there. Okay, can you see how that's folded over? And then what I'm going to do is very carefully cut, even though I've lost my scissors, very carefully cut that corner off. So can you see where this corner is here, where it meets the edge of my quilt top coming up and the edge of my quilt top going across there? I'm trying to cut that from this corner to this corner. Can you see that? So I'm going to give it a good finger press and then carefully trim that corner there. Can you see how that works? So the trim, oops, is lining up with the edge of my quilt top. And I'm going to, in fact, I'm going to just to stick a pin in that just to hold it there whilst I do the other edges. So let me do the other edges. I always have a habit when I'm doing anything in sewing is do opposites, because it's just a little tip. If you move round, you move the fabric round and you can end up with a little, you know, ruckle somewhere. So by doing opposites all the time, that helps to stop that happening. So same thing again, I'm folding that down to make sure it's nice and straight and giving it a nice 45-degree angle there, making sure that it all looks straight along there and it looks straight up there. And if I'm happy with that, I'm going to trim from edge to edge. Oops. Okay, let's pin that down. And then let's do this one here. So fold it down. So the corner is in the fold, if you like. Making sure my edges are straight. Give it a good press. And if I'm happy with that, trim from edge to edge. Get a pin in there. And then the opposite corner. So pull that down. So again, my corner is in that fold. Make sure that I've got a proper 45 degrees and that's straight and that's straight. Good press, finger press. And then that's across there. So far, it's looking like that, which, to be honest, is quite attractive, but that's not what we want to do. So we want to get the edges finished. Now, you can use an iron at this stage, so I'm going to show you how to do that because it actually makes it nice and crisp. So just bear with me for 1 second whilst I get my iron going. So the first thing I'm going to do is give these corners a good press. So let's take a pin out and give that a good press. That will make it nice and crisp. And just in case you're having a bit of a heart attack, I have got lots of insulated wadding underneath here. And one of these days I'm going to get myself one of the little ironing mats. Don't ask me why I haven't got one. I've been quilting for years. I just haven't. Like everybody, I have a massive list of things that I want to get, and not every one I have. Let's just move that because that shuffled a little bit. Did you see how that shuffled up? I really want this edge here to meet that line there. Can you see? Let's do that one. That's better. And so that's my 4 corners, if you like, done. Now the next thing, I want to take one edge at a time. I want to take this raw edge and fold it in so it meets the edge of my quilt top and my wadding. So this is our cut edge of our quilt top and wadding. I'm going to fold that in just in half so the raw edge meets the edge of my quilt top, and I'm going to give that a quick press. That will help with the next bit. So I'll do that all the way around. It also makes it look good. So edge, fold in half so it meets the edge of your quilt top. Okay, so it's raw edges together. Don't worry, there is another fold to go. But a bit of preparation, a bit of ironing as we do this makes it nice and crisp. So again, it's folded in half, and then last we're folding the raw edge in half on itself so it meets the quilt top. Alright, so we've done that bit. So it's beginning to look a bit like Christmas. That's the wrong phrase. It's beginning to look a little bit like binding. And then the last fold is where the magic happens. So we take an edge and we fold it over. So where we've got that raw edge against the edge of our quilt top, it's in there that we're now folding over onto the quilt top. And you want to make sure that you've done that all the way right to the edge, because this is how we form our miters. So let's get that pulled over and give that a bit of a press. And then if you want to, which is probably a good idea, either get those clips or stick a pin in, whatever you've got to hand. I normally use clips, to be fair, but they are behind me. So that's one side. Let's do the opposite side. So again, there's where it's folded over and the raw edge is meeting the edge of my quilt top. I'm folding it all the way over, right to the end, and giving it a good press. Stick some pins in there. And another pin over here. I don't know why that is the most gigantic yellow pin. And then we'll fold this over here. So those are two sides, and we're going to do the same here at the top. So fold that down. And this is where you really want to make sure, can you see how as I fold that, we get the mitre corner there? Can you see that? Let's put that right up to camera. So as I fold it over, I get the mitre. Can you see? It's good, isn't it? So when we're doing this, we really want to make sure that any little excess fabric, pop in there with your fingernail. Let's get an iron on that straight away. Stick a pin in it before it changes its mind. Have you noticed that about fabric? It likes to change its mind about things. You put it somewhere and then it says, I don't want to be there. I'm going to move over here. Let's do the other side. Let's put that down and get that all folded. If you find, so this is a good example, and this is why you will never see me hiding things in my videos. To be fair, sometimes the bobbin runs out and I do put it on pause while I rewind a bobbin. But can you see here where you look and you go, well, that's not a mitered corner, is it, by anybody's imagination? And I need to show you these things as well because they happen in absolute real life. So if it's going like that, it's because we haven't tucked in the fabric and we haven't folded it enough. But that's fine, we can just fiddle with it a bit. So it's probably because this bit wasn't folded over. So with a little bit of help, can you see I've just brought that over. I'm trying to do this without my fingers in the way, and I am zoomed in as far as I can. And if I bring that down properly, I can now create my mitre. So it's normally, it just needs a little bit of a fiddle and some fabric being pushed out of the way. That's generally what needs happening. Okay, that's quite satisfying. There's a whole circle come together there. Okay, so let's stick a pin in there and stick another pin. I'll tell you something, this is where those clips come into their own on these corners. So we'll stick some pins in, but we've got the mitered corner in place. And then let's do that here as well. So fold it down. I'm using my nail. It's really good to get your nail in there and tuck it in and get those miters going. Pin in there. I've got the world's biggest pin there. I don't need that. Obviously all my big pins are fighting for dominance. It's not quite meeting there. I will fiddle because I like nice mitered corners, so I'm making sure that I've got the square here in the inside corner and I've got the mitre going up to the corner. If you've got a teeny tiny gap at the top, don't worry too much because we can close that off with some slip stitching in a minute. And then last corner. Okay, let's fold the fabric up, get that mitre in place. And can you see the same things happened here? So I just need to adjust it. This happens. It's fabric, fabric moves around. You just need to tell it who's boss. So that's probably in the right place for the mitre, but can you see here there's just a little, can you see that at the top there? It's just separated a bit. So I'm going to fiddle just a little bit with that. Just use my nail and squash it in. And if I get the iron on it and stitch it, nobody will ever know other than you and me. And we can keep it our secret. Okay, so I'm ironing with the pins, and this is why we need glass-headed pins. I've got a video on pins, which might be good to watch, but use glass-headed pins. I've also got one of my hairs there. Okay, so that's all folded over, ready to go. Now the next bit is, yeah, you could do this by machine or you can slip stitch that down, but because this is, it depends on the look that you want. This is now the front of the quilt. So you may want a nice machine finish, but you're going to see that stitch line on the back. So if you were doing a wall hanging, for example, and the back is always going to be against the wall and nobody's ever going to see it, then you could machine finish that and very carefully stitch right on the edge of that. But if this is a full-size quilt and somebody is going to see both front and back, then we want to slip stitch this front down. So let's do that next. Let me get my iron out of the way and my temporary ironing mat out of the way, and let's get slip stitching. Ready to go on this bit. So I've got a needle. It's all threaded up with a single strand of thread with a knot on the end. I like having knots on the end of my thread, depending on what I'm doing. If you want to do a little double stitch to start with, that's entirely fine too. Now, I know when we're looking at this, it's looking a bit sort of crinkled in some places. As I work round, I can smooth all that in. I am going to start somewhere in the middle of one of the sides because then I can come up to one of the mitres and tackle it. I don't know whether I need my reading glasses on or off at this stage because I need to have this under the camera so you can see. So I'm going to start underneath the binding and just get a little stitch in there underneath. Okay. Let's just do another little stitch for good measure. So that means the knot is going to be hidden just as it pokes out. The knot is going to be hidden underneath the binding. So I am going to be stitching the edge, the folded edge here onto the quilt top but I really need to make sure the stitches are hidden as much as I can underneath. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm folding up a little bit. Now can you see where the stitch is coming out at the top? And I'm going to go into the quilt top along a very small bit. It's a minute stitch. If I show that right up to camera, can you see how small that stitch is? But if I do it small, they become invisible. And then where the stitch is, then I'm going straight up inside and just into the fold. Can you see that? So it's not actually on the top of the binding, it's right on that folded edge of the binding. And small stitches, become invisible, but they also become secure as well. So I'm going to go around just to the mitre so you can see there. I also need to make sure that I'm not sewing through the back as well. And I'm sorry you have to look at the top of my head, but I can't look at the camera and I can't even see, to be honest. Do you know, they say that age doesn't come alone, and they are very right, aren't they? Because you can't see what you're doing. Your sight goes, you have all your wibbly wobbly bits, you groan when you get out of chairs. Just make sure you're not coming through the back. Sorry, I keep falling off the bottom. You haven't missed anything. That was just me trying to get one stitch in. Let's see if I can do it without my glasses at this distance. That's slightly better. Okay, so I'm sliding in the quilt top just underneath the edge of the binding and making sure my needle comes out right on that folded edge of the binding. Once you've got going, this is quite quick. And if you've put binding on before, this is no different to any other slip stitching at all. But if you're first time, then it's probably good that I show you what to do. So we're coming up to this first mitre, and I really want to make sure that this mitre does as it's told. So it's up to you whether you close off the corners or not. I like to, but can you see here there's a bit of a dodgy thing going on, so I really want to tell my fabric who's boss. I don't need that pin anymore because that's all stitched down, and let me use that time to make sure all this is folded in there. To see, we can stroke all our quilt top underneath and make sure we've got a nice sharp corner there, and I can stitch up there and I can pull that little corner together. So if it's not quite matching, don't worry too much. Just get a needle in there. This would be actually a lot more accurate and a lot easier to do if this was closer to me. I'm going to come back and do that, I think. Let's get this stitched down. By the way, it's a bit of a trick with your length of your strand of thread. Don't be tempted to go really long because it ends up being twisted and all manner of stuff, and it will end up knotting. So a shorter strand of thread that you change more often is easier. We've got stuff going all over the place. Okay, so I'm going to do that all the way around. You're not going to watch that because that'll be quite tedious viewing. That'll be like watching paint dry. So I'm going to slip stitch all the way around, and I'm going to just pull my mitres together and give those a little slip stitch as well, just to hold those in place. And then I will meet you back here in probably a magic millisecond. And there we have it, all stitched down using slip stitch, and I've pulled these mitre corners together. I've given it a good press and it all looks brilliant. So that is how you bring your backing over to do your binding and make your mitred corners. I hope that has helped. Please let me know how you get on in the comments below, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.